You've got those big dreams, right? The kind that lights you up when you imagine them. That next level career, the impact you're meant to make, the life that finally feels like yours. But I have to warn you, your current mindset can't create that reality. The version of you that exists right now won't get you there because your brain does not like change. It confuses growth with danger, so it will sabotage you to keep you safe in what's familiar, even if that means keeping you stuck where you are right now. Hi, my name is Kristi. I'm a board certified nurse practitioner, health coach, trauma survivor, and this is Trauma Free, where I help you change your mind and change your life, just like I did. And today, I'm going to expose what's actually holding you back from getting to your next level, how your nervous system resists transformation, and how to consciously rewire yourself for growth so you can start living in your purpose and start being the highest version of yourself even sooner. Let's keep it real. Your dream life is not for the version of you that I'm speaking to today. Your dream life is calling for the elevated and evolved version of you. But unfortunately, your brain doesn't care about your potential. It only cares about predictability and survival. So even if your current reality is draining you, your brain will choose familiar pain over unfamiliar growth because your brain is actually in an internal battle between your basal ganglia and your prefrontal cortex. Here's what's happening secretly without your knowledge. The basal ganglia is your autopilot system. It controls 95% of your behavior through ingrained routines, habits, and identity scripts. And the prefrontal cortex is your conscious decision maker. It's where vision, strategy, and long-term planning live. But the problem is, when you set out a new goal, like starting that business, stepping into leadership, or making big changes in your life, you start to shift control from your habitual responses, ruled by your subconscious and the basal ganglia, to intention, which is your conscious, ruled by your prefrontal cortex. And your brain gets worked up as a result. The amygdala fires up your fear response to your nervous system because growth feels like danger, not because it is, but because it's unfamiliar. Your body doesn't know the difference between real danger and emotional risk. So when you go to speak up for yourself, ask for more, or cut off what's draining you, your system may respond with anxiety, brain fog, procrastination, or even physical tension. But that's not being weak. It's actually a neural defense mechanism. If you're dreaming of freedom, creating wealth for yourself, or just peace in your life, but still operating from an identity built on avoidance, people pleasing, or perfectionism, you're caught in an identity trap. The identity lock-in phenomenon is when we unconsciously cling to outdated identities, even harmful ones, because they feel safe and predictable, because your ego is wired to protect your existing self-image, not create a new one. So you may defend yourself by saying, I've always been shy, or I'm not the leader type. But those aren't your truths. Those are scripts that were handed to you by trauma, culture, or fears. But every time you disrupt that script by taking a risk, saying no, or setting a boundary, you weaken the old identity and build the new neurological pathway to your next level self. And that resistance you feel, it's proof that you're rewiring your brain. So if you're uncomfortable right now, congratulations. You're actually evolving. I'm sure you don't lack motivation or willpower. You're just stuck in a biological loop that's designed to keep you there because stress suppresses your growth. You've probably tried to start a new habit before, maybe meditating, journaling, or launching that dream project, and somehow you just didn't stick with it. You end up blaming yourself, but the truth is, it's not your fault. It's your wiring. Under chronic stress, your brain releases a surge of dopamine, which is normally a feel-good chemical. But in this case, it reinforces the survival habits you already know, even the self-sabotaging ones. because stress-induced dopamine can cause your brain to double down on familiar behaviors, even if they're draining you. That's why you keep checking your phone instead of meditating, or why you procrastinate instead of doing that thing that you need to get done. It's not an issue with discipline. It's a stress regulation issue. And over time, your brain rewires to prefer stress instead. And this is critical for you to understand because you can't rewire your habits without first regulating your nervous system. Also, you might be working hard to grow, but if your environment hasn't evolved, it will quietly pull you back into old patterns because your environment reflects who you were 3 to 5 years ago, not who you're becoming. Think about it. The conversations you're having, the content you're consuming, the people you spend time with, all of these things mirror the identity you're trying to outgrow. And when your external world reflects your past self, it reinforces it. This is known as the mirror effect because your outside world reflects your internal beliefs and your identity. So if you feel stuck, it's because your environment and identity are conflicting with each other. If you're trying to become confident, but you're surrounded by people who constantly complain, gossip, or dismiss your growth, your nervous system gets the signal. Stay small and stay safe. Your brain seeks harmony. It wants your thoughts, behaviors, and your environment to match your identity. So if your internal upgrade doesn't match your external world, you'll either shrink your identity back to match your environment or change your environment to reflect your rising identity. That's why just trying harder never works in isolation, because you have to reshape your surroundings to support the person you're becoming. So if you're stuck, look around you. What in your world is keeping you stagnant but safe? Here's something that changed everything for me. You don't need to find your purpose. You need to become the person who can live in that. That version of you, the one who's confident, walking in your purpose, creating impact, it already exists. Not in your present life, but in possibility. Psychologists call this concept possible selves. The future versions of yourself you hope to become, fear becoming, or expect to become. And the research shows we are motivated not by logic or discipline, but by emotionally vivid images of who we could become. So the clearer your mental image is of that next level version of yourself, the more your brain starts to map a path to get there. Because focused mental visualization increases neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to create new pathways. That means when you vividly imagine your future self, speaking with confidence, owning your own business, and walking away from what no longer serves you, your brain begins to encode that into your reality. And even if your body feels afraid, your brain starts rehearsing that new identity. Over time, this creates actual changes in the brain's structure, especially in areas related to attention, memory, and emotional regulation. When I first thought about starting my business, Trauma-Free Coaching, I battled imposter syndrome because I didn't think I was credible enough to work with clients on my own without prescribing medications. Even though I was a board-certified nurse practitioner, I still felt like I didn't have the right to speak about trauma, healing, and transformation, even though I've lived it, and even though other people with even less credentials still do it. But I shifted this belief by practicing daily through visualization. For a few minutes every day, I imagine my business thriving because of the impact I have on others and their healing journeys. I visualized the feeling of gratitude that would bring into my life and how I would change so many people's lives for the better. And at first, it felt like a fantasy, but my nervous system started to follow. Not because the fear vanished, but because I stopped letting it lead. The visualized version of me became my motivation, and little by little, I grew into that adaptation of myself, and it became my reality. But if you don't intentionally design your future identity, your brain will keep replaying your past one. You'll make decisions based on who you were, not who you're becoming. You'll sabotage opportunities that don't match your current self-concept. And that's why so many people stay stuck, because they've never met their future self long enough to become them. You have to start visualizing your new self. Just close your eyes each day for 2 to 5 minutes and just picture your future self in a single bold scenario. Maybe launching that business or walking away from your old self. Feel what they feel. Don't just see them, embody them. What do they believe? What have they released? What are they no longer afraid of? And return to that version often, because with repetition, your brain will start to accept that version of yourself. This is the part most people don't realize. Becoming your highest self means doing away with the person you used to be. And it's not always pretty. Psychiatrist Carl Jung called this transformation the ego death, a moment when the self you built for safety, approval, or survival begins to dissolve. And even though this is the doorway to rebirth, it feels like dying, because in a way, it is. You start shedding the identity that kept you small but safe, the role that earned applause but cost you authenticity, and the version of you that was accepted by others but was painful to live inside. And letting go of that, it hurts, even if it no longer aligns with who you are, because that old identity was predictable. And to your nervous system, predictability is comforting. When I began to step into my purpose, launching my channel Trauma Free, sharing my story and guiding others through healing, I had to confront something terrifying. I had to release the version of me who had once saved my life. Kristi, the nurse practitioner. But deep down, I knew I had not come this far just to stay professionally accepted. I came to make my impact on those in search of real healing. But it still hurt, because I grieved the identity I had built with years of schooling, sacrifice, and societal validation. I grieved the certainty and the paychecks. But what came next? Freedom, expansion, and a new chapter without any limitations. You're probably wondering, why does it have to feel so hard? And that's because your brain is wired to keep you consistent with your past identity, even if that identity is rooted in pain, burnout, or self-betrayal, because your nervous system craves patterns. Change equals risk. Risk equals uncertainty. And uncertainty, that activates your amygdala, or your threat detection center in your brain. So as you start to shift into confidence in your truth, your body might feel like it's under attack. But this is not a warning sign to stop. It's a sign you're releasing an outdated version of yourself. So keep it up. And that ache you feel and emotional tension, that pull to return to that familiar even when it hurts, it's not you regressing. It's resistance. It's your final emotional attachment to the version of you that's no longer compatible with your future. And when you finally allow that version to lay to rest, you make peace for the future version of yourself. So here's what to do when you're in the grieving phase. Number 1, honor the old version of yourself and appreciate how this past version protected you, and thank them for getting you here. And you do that by being compassionate and forgiving to your past self. Number 2, expect the grief, not just gratitude. Transformation doesn't just bring joy, it also brings grief. So let them both exist. You do this by processing and accepting these emotions, then releasing them. Number 3, create rituals of release. You do this by doing something that's sacred and that resonates with you as a way to show yourself you're closing this chapter. And be patient with the process, because sometimes the hardest part of growth isn't becoming someone new. It's saying goodbye to who you used to be. But that's the cost of alignment. And trust me, it's worth it, because on the other side is the higher version of you. We often think growth requires grinding, but lasting transformation doesn't come from doing more. It comes from becoming someone new on a subconscious level. And that means you're rewiring your identity. So let's break down how to do that step by step. Step 1, identity awareness, which is the starting point of all change, because before you can become the new version of yourself, you need to understand who you are now. So ask yourself, who am I on autopilot? What do I believe about what's possible for me? And what roles, beliefs, or habits no longer serve my next chapter? This activates what psychologists call metacognition, which is the ability to observe your own thoughts. When you become conscious of your identity loops, you create a gap between who you've been and who you're becoming. And the gap is where change begins. Step 2, strategic discomfort, which is the sweet spot for neural rewiring. The brain doesn't rewire through being comfortable. It rewires through purposeful discomfort. For example, spending as little as 15 intentional minutes a day doing something that scares you, like speaking your truth or setting boundaries, puts your brain in the optimal state for neuroplasticity. The discomfort activates growth, and if you repeat it constantly, the fear fades, the identity shifts, and the wiring in your brain changes. Step 3, environmental reshaping, because your space programs your brain. And most people overlook this, but your environment is programming you. Not physically, but neurologically. Think about it. Your space is filled with mental cues, and cues trigger routines. So if your space reflects your past self, your habits will too. So here's how to upgrade your space. Put your journal or an affirmation card on your pillow and end your day with intention. Change your lock screen on your phone to your why, to remind your brain constantly who you're becoming. Because your environment doesn't just influence your identity, it reinforces it. Step 4, use daily future self-rehearsal. Because imagining a future action lights up your brain the same way as doing it. That means every time you visualize yourself showing up confidently, speaking your truth to someone, or walking into your dream home, or launching your brand with purpose, you're not just daydreaming. You're building neural pathways that make it easier to act on. So rehearse your future self daily. Step 5, use cognitive dissonance as a signal, not a stop sign. Because that pull between your comfort zone and your calling, that's cognitive dissonance in action. And it means you're evolving. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort we feel when our current identity is misaligned with the identity we're trying to embody. But instead of regressing backwards, use it as fuel. Rewiring your identity isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally becoming all of you, and on purpose. The human brain is hardwired to seek certainty, even if it costs us our happiness. It will choose predictable pain over uncertain possibilities every time, unless you interrupt that loop. I want you to know, it's not that you don't want change, it's that you're still pretending to be the version of you that fits your old life. Imagine 2 future versions of yourself. Version A, the current version of yourself, still replaying the same patterns, still saying I'll change when, but that day never comes. Still hiding and letting everything but you call the shots in your own life. Then there's version B, the one that chose themselves. They're free and living in their purpose. Not because the past changed, but because they did. They refused to let their fears and circumstances own them anymore. And because of that, they're living proof that the bravest thing you'll ever do is step into the unknown so you can live as the highest version of yourself. Now ask yourself this, which version would you want to wake up as tomorrow? Because you don't find version B, you choose them. Remember, you're not just breaking habits, you're breaking identity attachments. And that takes bravery, neuroplasticity, and real inner work. So will you let the old version of yourself die so you can birth the higher version of yourself into existence? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear how you're releasing your outdated identities. And until next time, take care.